Design is an act of service. We are often toiling on behalf of users and stakeholders, and within a lot of these constraints of what does everybody need and want, we have this window for that creativity, which can be a bit small. The empathy can be a bit exhausting and depleting. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a little journey from some of the academics or some of the things I've seen of it's tiring, this work, you know, and add on pandemic stresses and others, and it's even more problematic. I'll throw one last thought in there. This is sort of a piece of advice I actually just gave to some Mass Art students this week, and that's around finding balance of what replenishes you in the work. So Mass Art, we're a school of art and design. And when I first started 8 years ago teaching in the program, I thought, well, that's interesting. That building over there is art and we're design over here. And we do like MBA curriculum and designing, you know, digital products and service design and such. And it took me a minute to see, oh, we actually have to go down that hallway to replenish every once in a while and find the things that bring us balance and you know, recover from that exhaustion sometimes of the work.
And I feel like as you get more and more kind of, you know, later in your career, that, you know, the window of creativity gets smaller, and that probably has some role to play in the, you know, the exhaustion that sometimes starts to get set in.
I think that's right. And part of it depends on the organization's view and maturity around design.
There is a whole, you know, new change happening in the industry, both from, you know, the economy side and from the tech side, from, you know, the AI and all of the new technologies that are coming in. How are you navigating this new world that is changing rapidly, and how are you kind of dealing with you know, the added stress of you know, the economy as it is?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I might carve that into two questions and come back on the economy one, because I have a lot of thoughts on both.
Okay.
When I start with all the new technologies and new tools, I think it's a question that is coming up a lot. It's a question that we are facing at Mass Art and at Fidelity. There's a lot of competition for design jobs right now. You're right. The questions are tied together, right? It's a lot of reshuffling in the industry, as well as in what the roles mean and how they're done. I am probably, obviously, a pretty big optimist around the power of design. And I'm also kind of a techno-optimist around AI, not unfettered, but I think that there's a lot of great things that some of these new technologies do for our field. We're able to revisit how we've done work, how we will do work, things that didn't have specialist tool support in the past. And we're all figuring it out together simultaneously, right? Nobody particularly exactly knows. There's a lot of competing hypotheses out there, but I'll even point to Marvin as an example, though I know you didn't call me on here just to talk about Marvin, but when I first learned design research and anthropology in both of those kind of schools of thought, I had to learn how to transcribe by hand, code by hand, look for the threads of meaning by hand. And I took that and started teaching people how I was taught. Do I believe that that's important to know? Yes. Do I believe that's important for everybody to go through that grueling experience when there are tools that can do it pretty well now? No, I mean, I think it's really super powering to be able to use some of these new technologies and refocus and rebalance some of our efforts. I had a call just late last week with my boss at Mass Art, the dean. And one of the things we talked about was, you know, how do we continue to graduate people that are pointing at the career who are really savvy with AI tools? We've already seen the design fields go through a transition to become digitally savvy. The first time this is making me sound older than I am, but I first learned design, you know, on paper with scaling tools and compasses and stuff. I mean, the first bar chart I made was with markers. Becoming digital savvy was obviously really, really important to becoming effective in your career path then. We saw the same around being business model savvy, data savvy. There's no reason to believe that AI savvy wouldn't just be the next one. And it's not necessarily simple. So I think in terms of one of the things I'm doing, and one of the things I hope my students are doing with probably even more effect, is experimenting and continuing to navigate and learn and figure out where I can abstract some of the lessons to apply them to a changing landscape of tools. On the one hand, it's not all about the tools, right? I arrive in a new design team sometimes and people love talking about tools. I go, okay, but like, what exactly is it we're doing? But on the other hand, it really is, right? It is about becoming, we already have so much AI enablement, so much is happening when I drop something to a grid in Figma behind the scenes that's making me a better designer than I would have been by hand. That'll just continue, be increasingly powerful. We'll see the career, I think, continuing to remodel, and our ability to remodel with it and to navigate with it and carry on some of those lessons and mindsets and principles and theories is going to be increasingly important as our technical skill maybe becomes less differentiating.
Let's talk a little bit about the work itself, right? Like, especially from a UXR perspective, there are a couple of really interesting questions here that I think you'll have some good answers to. This idea of, you talk about empathy, right? Like empathy, and one of the big part of a UX researcher or even a designer is influencing other functions without actually having that much power, right? Like usually product managers are not going to report to designers or UXRs. How do you how do you build that influence? How do you start to kind of help, especially if you're an individual contributor? How are you advising members of your team to build that influence and drive that influence?
Yeah. Well, there's a long-term and a short-term answer. I feel like I'm like frameworking every answer. I apologize.
That's great.
Short-term is pure storytelling. I'm not necessarily, everyone's probably heard this a million times, right? But we've been doing a lot more video storytelling lately. A lot more, what are the tools and tech stack that can have me take the raw research findings and just show people, because my interpretation, I mean, there's still an editorial interpretation along the way, but how do I let people come to similar conclusions by seeing similar data put into the themes that I've observed, and that my role suddenly becomes less interpretation, still important, the interpretation, but more about curation of that story, so that I can persuade people to see it, to see the same thing I saw. There's a whole, I'm avoiding a rabbit hole there. Long-term, also maybe not new advice or novel advice, but relationships. So, I work in a 70,000 person company. One of the best ways I can have people trust me is to do something valuable for them, to just be of value. And so I think of design and research, UXR, as an act of service in that, and getting really clear on the front of what's the decision they need to make and what's going to be the most meaningful data they need. I am partly powered by curiosity when it comes to research. I'm curious to figure out how humans work, but I don't always get to indulge that curiosity in the pursuit of those relationships and those acts of service. Luckily, that concept of time and future and change within our own career space as well, but also within the industries, I think it is important for designers to be able to have a sense of change and time and direction and notion around, it's also the fad and trend kind of topics are all in there. How do we really make an effective design without that concept of time and future? But for some people, it'll be present focused. And for some people, it'll be more future focused. And that's okay too. None of us can really predict the future, right? So all we can do is imagine design decisions that point to potential futures and try to use the strategic side of design to evoke those decisions and get them on things that we can put into learning processes. So, I mean, that's maybe the third answer. I said I'd only give two. I went to three. But design is a learning process. Great work is never really finished. It's only ever abandoned, right? So how do we take some of that lesson from the art world over to, we are continuing to learn towards a future, keep some options open, and continue to refine based on as we realize that future. So in that way, I think designers are always navigating a little bit into the future, at least, if not occasionally outpost distant vision kind of stuff. Design is increasingly about meaningful intention and humanity and bringing in a point of view that is not just about the skills. And when we talk about technology coming in, and we talk about some design jobs are getting smaller at the same time as the field of design is maybe getting higher minded about some things, and wielding some of that point of view in the interview process, making it clear that you're not there just to push pixels around, because designers have that set of mindsets and belief and culture, and it doesn't have to be called design as an act or a role or an identity for that all to be in there. So I think keeping that as a service. And the other one is experimenting with those cutting edge tools. I think for the students coming out of Mass Art, I often tell them, you're in an environment in my program in 2 years, you have 2 years you can experiment with method, with toolkits, with getting to the cutting edge that the momentum of an existing or even a brand new building practice won't always have the chance to get to. And so how do you come in with some of that fresh perspective on our changing field? Many of the great tools we've added to our tech stack, many of the new methods we've added in recent years have really come from that infusion of fresh thinking, because I've known how I want to do things for a while. And, I want some of these new folks coming in to come in and shake things up a little bit. I have so many different thoughts related to this. One is, I think it will ultimately make handcrafted design better, powered. I think it'll make it harder to get to the point of being better. Think of like technology S-curves and how a new technology might need to operate under the performance of the existing dominant technology before it emerges as superior. You apply that to a human career path, and it's really tough to say. Maybe you need to spend years practicing before you can surpass what the AI is capable of. But once you do, you'll be in a better spot than anybody that didn't put that work in. It's like a longer runway to take off. I think of any creative field, we talk about novelty or originality, right? Authenticity. And the cynic might come and say, well, all human creativity is derivative. We learn from things around us. And so if you've built a derivative machine in AI, we can just kick out derivative after derivative after derivative. And really, how different is that going to be than what the human does? And I think it does, it raises the stakes for what it takes to be perceived as novel, because now I can mimic that derivative path. But letterpress came back, right? That we saw the touch of the human hand, the rise in the importance of human crafted material, and even the imperfections that come with that have come back into our society as more automation and more machine generation and more industrial generation continues to pervade kind of every category. I can tell you that downtown in Salem, Massachusetts, there are so many candle shops, and they make interesting stuff, right? But if you had asked 100 years ago if going into making candles was a good career path, probably not. It's going from a craft cottage kind of industry to a mass produced. I think we're seeing some of those. It's not the same, right? We're not seeing exactly that mass production mindset coming in, but we are seeing that remodeling. And so, yeah, what's the point? I think it raises the bar.
I think that's a really good point.
I think it makes when we cross that bar that much more meaningful. And the last point I'd made is I also think that right now we've already seen analog become more novel. When I get together with my team and use a whiteboard, it's like, wow, this is and I see my 9-year-old daughter grow up in a native technology environment where it's constantly available to her, and I am optimistic that I see her prioritizing time with other people too. So maybe the role of designer, not just about the crafted output of the design, but the process of the design and that human interaction, and designer as facilitator, designer as leader of kind of human interaction. That part of the job, I think, is going to keep getting bigger. I've already seen it get bigger, but I think it's going to keep getting bigger. As the pace of change keeps kind of increasing for our work, I think that the meaningfulness will also keep increasing. The intention, the understanding those complexities of what's actually going to lead the planet, society, culture, the things that sustain the human beings we're serving through design, those questions are going to keep getting bigger and harder to manage. And so keep at it.